Um, for the collaborative classroom, all of the curriculum is super plug and play for the most part. It does require basic training or understanding about how the different pieces work. But after that, especially with making meaning and being a writer, it has everything you need to know in one, maybe two manuals. It has all the books that you would possibly need. And so the planning time and the load on the teacher is low, and teachers can just like take it and run with it and ensure that kids have like basic comprehension and writing skills, not only like how to compose for being a writer, like the conventions, but also some more of the creative pieces like poetry or like some of the opinion writing and how to like add on and elaborate. So they know that none of the standards go missing when they're teaching with the curriculums, and they know that they're not going to have to invest a whole lot into planning. Like for a week, there's a look ahead section in which you spend about 20 minutes at the beginning of the week looking ahead. And then daily, about 5 minutes, like gathering your materials and then like reading through the curriculum. You're supposed to also like make sure that you read the books and mark them with Post-its for the comprehension questions or where vocabulary instruction is going to happen. But it's a low lift in terms of planning and implementation. Another strength is I really appreciate the explicit vocabulary instruction. Every week there's 4 tier 2 words. Students have opportunities to apply to other contexts, so they really internalize it. They're able to use it, the word orally. They have like role plays and games, and they really start to love these words, and they come alive for them. And so I think that that's a big strength, because we know that vocabulary is so important, and a word is a hook to hang an idea on. And so the kids are using the words not only when they're reading the text, but like through oral language and in their writing.
And what would you say on the flip side are aspects that teachers or kids don't necessarily care for?
Every teacher or kid that I've worked with them has appreciated and liked it. Like maybe it was because it was moving from like Calkins to something like this. That was a lot. They saw like growth right away. Meaning, and being a writer is that it's not content driven. And so that's actually a very big thing that I've been hesitant around myself. I think for new teachers, it's great to like get it rolling, but I wish that it was like deep thematic content units with the same kind of structure of curriculum. But I'm lacking the like, let's do a deep dive into being a change maker or space or pollinators or like something where kids can really build that content knowledge while learning these other pieces. So I think that's a gift.
So it's a challenge that it's not, that you're saying like you wish it had that content knowledge in terms of just building knowledge, or in terms of having like a social justice mindset? What are you referring to?
I'm referring to both. Like there's not a lot of knowledge building. It like takes a concept and then not necessarily like content concepts, but it just like jumps around. Like it's like, okay, we're gonna look at nonfiction text and learn all about the pieces of nonfiction text, but it doesn't go like deep into one idea.
Yeah.
And in Oakland, our context, like I really want students to go deep into like social justice standards and environmental advocacy standards. So these standards exist and they are missing within these curricula. So I think there's an opportunity for to use the same structure as the CCC Learning Hub has, but go deep into curriculum and social justice standards.
So with Wit and Wisdom, teachers and kids really liked the writing instruction piece. So they were writing throughout the day. So it wasn't just this one writing block. And so kids started to feel like they had more input. It also led their discussions a little bit better. So we also did a side focus on academic discussions and how to implement small groups. So kids were writing throughout the day across content. Teachers were able to get kids to give their input in many different ways. So it was small group discussions, whole group discussions, writing. Kids were giving feedback to one another on the writing. So that was the strong point for Wit and Wisdom with both kids and teachers. A con was the amount of time that it took to plan out like a week's worth of lessons. I mean, then there were spaces where the vocabulary and phonics sections weren't very strong. So we had to do some more PD around vocabulary development. It was also very time consuming. So teachers had to, we were in a position where we were able to pay teachers for their time. So extra hours of planning with coaches, we were able to pay for PD from the publishers themselves. So that's a con, because that's not something that is available to everyone, right? Also, still, even with all of that extra vocabulary development, teacher development, professional development, planning time, you'd still be missing, there'd still be gaps, right? There were still gaps in curriculum, gaps in the amount of time that it took to plan. I mean, they always felt like they were rushing, even when we were in person in school. So Wit and Wisdom was it was very top heavy. And so teachers really anchored into the writing, kids really anchored into the writing. They anchored into the format of the academic discussions, and that rolled out some positives across content areas. But as far as actual like reading instruction, like we didn't get past the first module as far as the literature that kids were supposed to be reading. We never made it out of the first module in 2 years.
Well, you didn't make it out of the first module because time ran out, or what do you mean?
Because, teachers want to do a really good job of making sure kids at each level understand the books, understand the vocabulary and the reading. You spend so much time on the background knowledge for vocabulary development that you didn't really get into the reading. Even kids who are proficient readers, you have your small groups, but when you're building in like reading materials, guided reading materials for kids who might not be at grade level, and you still want them to have access to grade level content, it just got to a point where we couldn't get out of, we never got past the first 4 books in the first module.
So the thing I like the most is just that it's routines, and it's the same, from shared reading into the differentiated instruction in small group. So the routines are super easy. I hardly have to plan. I picked it up really quickly. And then I think also that's what the students like. They know what to expect every day, so that then they can just focus on what's being taught. They know exactly what they're doing. It makes them feel confident. I also think that the students really like the books that we have during shared reading, the books that we read during ELA time. And also they get to see like their progress in a really real way. And it makes them excited about reading and learning to read.
You say they get to see their progress in a real way. Are you talking about, what are you talking about?
So they have different differentiated instruction small groups. And it's like within 3 weeks, they get the first round of tests. And then they get to move up a group, and we just really celebrate it. And I'm like, you're moving up in a group. You're moving from using letter sounds to using letter patterns. This is your new group. And it's just very exciting for them to know that they're working on a new skill, and they see that they're making progress in that way. The only thing that I don't like about it is that some of the books are kind of outdated. For instance, there was like a Thanksgiving book that we read that I really had to have a talk with the kids about later. But from my understanding, Bookworms, they're currently they're reviewing the curriculum and changing up some books that are outdated. So that'll be fixed, I think, next year.
One of the biggest positive pieces of feedback that we receive is around EL being really content driven. So the modules that come with EL are really comprehensive and tackle like every angle of a given topic. So you'll get a nonfiction text on a topic. You'll get a fictional text on a topic. You will get, videos, different sort of, kids will have at bats with writing. Like everything feels really cohesive. I think coming out of the Common Core movement, we've really in ELA focused on skills-based learning. So can kids identify the main idea? Can they identify the theme? Do they understand the text feature? And I think what EL does really well is it acknowledges the skills, but really doesn't forget about the content, which is pretty powerful.
Yeah. And then on the flip side, what are some things that you've observed or heard from teachers that they may not like about it?
I wouldn't say this would be something that teachers don't like. I would say that something that teachers find challenging, or is like the thing that we work on when we support our teachers, is the EL approach is really, it's a school model, not just a curriculum. And so there's a lot of things that come with it. So there's the way we call, like in past organizations I've been in, we have like advisory for students, right? They have
Right.
crew. So there's just like, you know, some aspects of close reading are called different things. Like language dives is one aspect of close reading that like looks or like is called something different in EL. So EL is really, it's not as much of a plug and play curriculum as some of the other curriculums that are trending right now. You have to really deeply understand it, understand the long-term goal of the curriculum, and then understand how to internalize the curriculum as it comes. EL has a trillion resources. Like you go on that website and there are read alouds, there are, you know, like anything a teacher needs is there down to like a scripted level for each lesson. But when you are a brand new teacher, no one's like, so often we prepare our teachers to plan, but we don't necessarily prepare them to internalize. And because it's almost like learning a new language, and that can feel challenging for our teachers. I will say though, again, that the one thing that will move kids in early literacy, I'll go on record saying it, is volume of text. Like kids just need to read all the time. And so I love EL and I support it. I think that EL plus a structured block, 30 minutes, 45 minutes of some other form of text immersion is incredibly important for regardless of any curriculum. Like regardless of like if wit and wisdom or completely, like kids need to be reading, and that's what's gonna move the needle, if you want to say. So it's so interesting. It's like for some reason, I think in like the push for data growth and all the things, like we teach and we talk a lot about reading, but we don't necessarily like the lesson is talking about reading, but not actually like reading. I don't know if that makes sense.
I got you.
That to me, I think EL does a good job of a text balance. I will say again, like that there just needs to be more volume of text in other spaces in the school.
That's one of your reflections on wit and wisdom and the decision to adopt it and what you all saw. I'd love to hear what you all saw for teachers and kids. What did you consider to be the strengths of the curriculum, and what were some of the drawbacks?
Yeah. For us, our ELA team got together with a couple APs of instruction and really studied wit and wisdom. We had gone to Standards Institute. We were building our own knowledge of the standards. And that, of course, made us very curious and really intrigued just about making a curriculum switch, because that's something that the Standards Institute, I think, really advocates for. And so as we looked at wit and wisdom, I think what we were really sold on was just how closely aligned it was to the rigor of the grade level standards, being able to come at like having really interesting essential questions for a given unit, and then really building the students' knowledge from a whole variety of firsthand sources, videos, different narratives, really having kids pull together and use so many different sources of information and knowledge to kind of craft their arguments about a given, essential question that was in a unit. We were all just like, this is so much better than anything we could have come up with. This is so, it's from the Great Minds team, that created Eureka, and they're just top notch. And I think when we studied the curriculum, it really demonstrated that. And we kind of went through and did like a sample unit together just to really study it and feel it out together. And we were super, super impressed, I think, with the rigor, but also just the deep content, like how deep and excited kids could get about content doing any one of the given units because of what's laid out there.
And on the flip side, what were some things that you guys weren't so thrilled about?
Well, I will tell you, I think implementing a new curriculum is exceptionally hard. And I think it was hard. It was when we're still learning the standards and you're trying to teach a curriculum that is closely aligned to the standards, it's just a mismatch from your own kind of knowledge base, either as a school leader or as a teacher. So that learning curve is tough. And I think, the things that help mitigate that are really constructive planning time where you're really doing the internalization of the unit. You're really thinking about what are the essential understandings, what's the essential content knowledge, how does it build? You're doing all that analytical work before you start teaching it. And it was just a big learning curve, I think, right? Because right now, let's be real, our levels of rigor, at least in Aspire classrooms, were low. We were not teaching at the grade level standard. So for us, the curriculum forces you, up towards actually what grade level expectation is. And that's tough. I think it's right. To me, that is like justice and that is equity, giving our kids that. But it's hard to do. And I think you're learning how to do that through your work with the curriculum.
Expeditionary learning, it's kind of interesting because the first few books for upper elementary are the same as the first 4 books for Wit and Wisdom. So we didn't have to order new materials. We already had them. So there are a lot of comparisons there. We've been doing it virtually the entire time. The teachers like the lesson plans. There are some scripted aspects. Our teachers are really well versed in the technology side anyway. So manipulating slides and instructing students in how to, share screens, manipulate slides, share their writing, share their reading, wasn't as big of a lift for our upper elementary students as it might be at some other schools, because we've had, access to technology through our grant. One thing that is not working out very well is the writing section for expeditionary learning with us. So it's the opposite. Well, in person, we'd probably get a lot more done, but with the instructional minutes being so short, and teachers wanting to make sure that kids are reading and having more discussions, we're not actually anchoring into the writing as much as we were when we had Wit and Wisdom. But the teachers prefer the format for expeditionary learning. Again, there was buy-in from our teachers. We had an opportunity for them to meet with teachers who were already in the first year pilot before they did some compare and contrast between, I think it was EL, F&P, classroom, and staying with Wit and Wisdom. And they chose to join the second year pilot for expeditionary learning.
Okay. And what do you know of bookworms, the pros and cons?
So I had an opportunity to observe a classroom using bookworms, and the small group piece especially for high frequency words, letter sounds, and reading fluency. I actually had an opportunity to start working with a small group of kindergartners before we left for the shelter in place. So we were going to roll it out in a first grade class and 2 kindergarten classes, but we didn't have that opportunity. The best thing about it is that all of the materials come with the program. So we didn't have to worry about, buying extra decodables. We didn't have to worry about buying an online component. We didn't have to worry about, because it's open source, so we didn't have to worry about spending money. We also didn't have to worry about, putting the materials together because they came already, like the intervention materials came together already. So it was a lot less planning time for my kinder and first grade teachers. So that was one of the huge reasons why I was really excited about rolling it out for small groups and primary, because for kinder and first especially, prep time is everything. Putting materials together, making sure that they have the right items for right groups is huge. So with bookworms, all of that came.
But what about drawbacks or negatives from bookworms?
I didn't see any, and it's only because I had such a short time with it, right? So if we'd had, I got it 3 weeks before shelter in place, immediately started working with the highest need kindergartners that my 4 kinder teachers could provide me with. And then a couple of weeks later, and my teachers had just gotten the materials. And then as soon as we were ready to roll it out, I was the guinea pig. And so as soon as we were ready to roll it out for the teachers, the classroom teachers, it was time to close it down.
So I'm going to speak from the 3rd grade curriculum because that's the one I know the best. I've seen other grades teaching it as a mentor and a coach. But one of the things they love is just going deep into a module, into a theme. And there's so much research about how good that is for our kids to be able to go deep onto one thing and really become expert in it, and build those neural pathways and be able to build their learning and capacity with deeper comprehension questions as they learn the content more deeply. So for an example, in third grade, they were doing space. There's a whole unit around space, and a unit around oceans, a unit around immigration, and especially the space unit. There's just so many ways that we got into some really complex conversations, and they got really excited about that. There were opportunities for them to build knowledge through video, through multiple texts from multiple perspectives. So that was something that they got jazzed about.
That's great. What would you consider to be a drawback or something that's not so hot about it?
Well, there are a few things. One, it does not represent our kids. The books are about a lot of white men, and that's just it.
Not all of it.
Not all of it, but a lot of it. So for my, for the majority of the year, I felt like I was then having to supplement and bring in people of color. So that is a drawback, I think. Another is that just from a teacher's perspective about ease of use, I feel like they're not consistently, I don't think they're very accurate about how long things are going to take and what's going to hold attention and how to really get to the heart of the matter. I mean, in COVID time, we're having to Marie Kondo these lessons in a major way, but I think even so, it's just like, how many objectives are you going to have for one lesson? Like, it's just so much that it feels like sometimes it's hard to know where to focus. That gets easier over time with multiple years of experience. So the good thing is, and support. The good thing is you're using really complex texts. You're getting the kids to do some really high-end hard thinking. The bad thing is that it's a heavy lift on the teachers to get that kind of productive struggle that you need the kids to have. And I just feel like there's this, they're putting all the ELA standards in there, but you just cannot teach everything that's there in a lesson in a day. There's just no way to do all of that. And B, I don't feel like they're actually teaching the writing to the extent that they're teaching the reading. So how do we teach the writing, not just expect them to write?
Just, I'd love to hear your perspective on that, like the pros and cons, strengths and weaknesses of Wit and Wisdom. What do you think of it?
I also love a lot of the books that were chosen. I don't think all of them, right? I think in third grade in particular, right? But there are some books in kindergarten where the language is just so rich, and it was amazing to go into a kindergarten classroom and listen to kiddos having conversations with rich language, vocabulary, I've gone to second grade, and so certain grade levels are definitely way better than others. Like second grade, I love second grade.
Second grade, it's very different grade to grade. Second grade is great. Fifth grade has some great stuff. Third grade, unit 1, crap. Like, it just like in terms of like, who wrote this and how does this flow? Like, not always consistent. But I do think that the importance of books in the hands of kids, complex text in the hands of kids, like that is a positive.